well. Good morning, everyone, and thanks so much for being here. We're here today for our presentation on teen time, and we're joined today by Dr. Matt Roth of the Milestone, what is it? Milestone
Psychology.
Yeah, Milestone Psychology. Thank you so much. But yes, a few housekeeping notes before we get started. We are offering simultaneous interpretation in Spanish this morning. Si desea escuchar la presentación en español, por favor oprime el globo al fondo de la pantalla que dice interpretación y ahí usted podrá escuchar la presentación en español. Gracias de nuevo. So yes, other housekeeping notes. We wanted to let you know that we are broadcasting this on Facebook Live this morning. So hi, everybody joining us on Facebook. Thanks for joining us today. And want to give you a warm welcome. If you have any questions, for those of you joining us on Facebook, please place them in the comment section, which we'll be monitoring throughout the presentation. And yes, we are recording this. It will not be available on our Facebook or YouTube pages, but on our website, on our Synergia website. And I'll be sharing that information with you in a follow-up email after this presentation. There is a PowerPoint. Unfortunately, due to copyright, we cannot share that. However, you will have access to the presentation recording. There will be a poll activated at the end of this presentation. So please stick around for that. It's really short and easy. We really appreciate your feedback as well. We encourage questions at any time. However, remember that this is a public forum and we are being broadcast on Facebook. Questions that are of private or case-specific nature, we ask that you please forward those questions either to the Regional Autism Center at NYU, or you can contact us here at Synergia. And again, that information will be shared with you in a follow-up email. So my name is JC Cortez. I'm the Director of Training and Development here at Synergia's Metropolitan Parent Center. Synergia is a multi-service agency located in Manhattan in East Harlem, and we've been supporting New Yorkers with disabilities and their families for more than 40 years. We offer a rich source of information and training tailored for parents, including parents whose primary language is not English or who they themselves have special training needs. We help them participate more effectively in their children's education and development, and we partner with professionals and policymakers like we have today to improve outcomes for all children with disabilities. Synergia, which is Spanish for synergy, is one of New York City's 3 federally funded parent centers, and we are committed to serving people with disabilities and their families with an added focus on communities of color and the economically disadvantaged. Synergia creates innovative programs ranging from transitional housing for homeless families who have children with disabilities, community residences for adults with developmental disabilities, parenting classes for adults with intellectual disabilities, and parent and education advocacy training for parents of children with disabilities. So I want to thank you all for being here today. And Matt, thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to Synergia. We have so many questions and thank you for them. We've tried to include them as much in this presentation already. If you do have any questions, please feel free to submit them either in the chat or the Q&A. Please remember if they are case specific, we probably can't get to those, but we will provide you information or contacts of where you can send that information. So thank you for joining us. Matt, please.
Okay, thanks, JC. All right, I'm going to go ahead and share my PowerPoint. Okay, well, good late morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to speak to everyone today. I'm Matt Roth. I'm a psychologist at Milestone Psychology in Midtown, in the Flatiron District. And today we're going to be talking about sexuality and autism. A brief overview of today, we're going to talk about what sexuality is. It's a very broad topic. And then we're going to talk about what we know about sexuality and autism. There's some questions that are still up unexplored that we're just going to introduce today. And we're going to talk about what sexuality education as a whole, and particularly within specific topics we're going to address today. We're going to infuse some tips on how to educate teens with autism throughout the presentation. And there's a focus really today on safety. I look at this with a big safety lens. Given my work, I've had experiences where individuals have unfortunately gotten themselves into trouble because of certain behaviors, and they just didn't have the proper education that this was inappropriate. So when I typically start this presentation, I just put this word up on the screen, and I usually ask the audience, like, what comes to mind when you see the word sexuality? And for time's sake, just gonna kind of go through what I usually get. And the answers I usually get are things such as love, attraction, sex, intimacy. Those are the most common ones. But however, sexuality is a much broader topic than just those terms. Those terms are certainly a part of it, but there's a lot more. And this is a diagram, a visual of all the areas and dimensions of human sexuality. And as we can see, these include things that are tangible, that, things that exist in our environment, in our world, and things that are intangible, which are more psychological or internal experiences related to sexuality. Now, autism and sexuality is still a growing area. I have been doing this type of work since around, let's say, 2007. And there's a heck of a lot more now than there used to be. And we certainly know a lot more now, but we still don't know enough. We still need to learn more about sexuality development in autism, how it may differ, how it may be the same. And we need to know how to effectively teach our teens about sexuality so they can live their best lives and keep themselves safe. And unfortunately, there's a lot of myths around sexuality and ASD that off the bat, we just need to dispel. Individuals may think inappropriately and incorrectly that individuals with autism aren't interested in sexuality. That's just like nonsense. That is absolutely incorrect. And there's actually more and more in media and television now that's reflecting individuals with autism and their interest in sexuality. There's another myth that if you teach somebody with autism about things like sex or masturbation or self-pleasure, they're going to develop a really restrictive interest in it, and then they're going to start exhibiting these behaviors inappropriately. And that is also factually incorrect. We actually know through research that the best way to prevent inappropriate behaviors is to teach them and what they are. And then the converse is actually what we see, is that when people are not taught about these things is when you start to see inappropriate behaviors in public. If we hide the information, it's going to lead to unhealthy sexual behaviors. And individuals with autism have the absolute potential to develop a healthy sexuality and live a healthy sexual life according to their own values. Oh, there you go. Myths. No myths. So these are the things that we could potentially talk about today. And it's a long list, going back to the idea that sexuality is a very broad, wide-ranging topic. We can't go through all these things today. We are going to focus on the ones that are still bold. And one of the major points I want to kind of to get across today is that these things need to be taught proactively, meaning that we should be teaching these things early before the issue arises, before the interest arises, before the behaviors arises, before the questions even arise. And we want to do that because if we're reactive, if we only react to inappropriate behaviors, or we wait until somebody starts masturbating or somebody starts trying to flirt with someone they're attracted to, we are going to be too late and the teen may do something that has gotten themselves into trouble. And again, a major point of this presentation is like we want this to be a safe journey for everybody. So we need to teach this proactively to get them the information so they can start integrating it and to keep themselves and others safe. So the first area, which is when I work with teens with autism, I usually start with hygiene and body changes. Because individuals with autism mature like everyone else. There's nothing atypical about that. And sometimes puberty comes even earlier, particularly for females. Menarche can start earlier for females on the spectrum. And society expects our teenagers to maintain a certain level of hygiene. And this is easier said than done for many teens with autism for a variety of reasons. One, there's actually like a social awareness barrier here. So teens may not always understand the reason why we expect hygiene or why we expect them to engage in certain hygiene behaviors. I once worked with a teen that would go weeks without showering. And when asked about it, he would say, well, I don't really mind the way I smell when I don't shower, so it's fine. Well, we don't only shower for ourselves. We shower because other people may smell us. And we have to keep ourselves clean and odorless for other people, not just for ourselves. There's also what we would call executive functioning problems with hygiene, meaning it's more of a cognitive problem, that to effectively have a proper and appropriate hygiene practice, we have to have a routine. We have to plan ahead. We have to initiate. We have to transition off watching TV at night to get ready for bed. We have to get out of bed in the morning to brush our teeth, right? And that is more difficult for teens with ASD than neurotypical teens. So we have to help our teens get into a routine and a habit for appropriate hygiene practice. And then finally, there's sensory challenges. So individuals with autism can have sensory sensitivities that can lead to poor hygiene practice or absence of hygiene practice. When I first started doing this, I worked with a teen that was so sensitive to tactile stimulation that he could not tolerate deodorant to the point where it looked like a deodorant phobia, where he would run out the room if you had a stick of deodorant in your hands. And this can be true for deodorant, for shaving, for using certain soaps. Certain scents can impact things like cologne or body wash or deodorant. And so we have to also examine, are there any potential sensory barriers getting in the way of proper hygiene practice? Now, if you are working or you are the parent of an individual that needs to improve on their hygiene practice, and let's say they don't have yet the skills down to master certain hygiene tasks like shaving, modeling is a great way to do this. And you can model things yourself, or you can find videos on the internet, and websites like Howcast and YouTube have lots of great videos to show individuals how to do certain hygiene tasks. And the great part about it is you can pause them, you can rewind them, you can stop them if they're learning step by step and you're only doing a little bit at a time. So videos are a great way to help implement proper hygiene. Another method is breaking down the steps into something we call a task analysis. And this is really better known as a step analysis, as opposed to doing a video model for individuals that may be more verbal and are able to take in this type of written information. Breaking things down in steps like this can also really be helpful. Now, depending on the individual, it doesn't always need to be this specific. This is just a really comprehensive example of how we brush our teeth. Things that we pick up that may be more challenging for others. And there are easy ways to make this. I think the easiest way to make this is that you just do it. And then as you're doing it, write down what you're doing. And there is your task analysis. There are websites that do have pre-made ones for this. Also an option. Just Google task analysis, hygiene, or the skill you're looking to teach. So getting off hygiene and going to the area of sexualized behaviors. And what I'm referring to here are things that society would consider sexualized behaviors. Things like self-pleasuring or masturbating, touching yourself, disrobing, taking your clothes off. This is something that is a concern for many parents of teens on the spectrum. And what it kind of boils down to is that the individual is having difficulties discriminating public versus private, meaning that they're doing private behaviors in public, and this can get somebody in a lot of trouble. I put the word sexual deviant in quotes because I hate that word, hate that phrase, but that's what people sometimes refer to individuals as when you see somebody engage in a sexualized behavior in public. We definitely want to avoid that. All these behaviors themselves are acceptable in private. And if we think about this idea of public versus private, for many of our teens with autism, a lot of them don't really have a lot of privacy, right? So we think about it, a lot of them are constantly being observed at school, maybe at home, even at home, especially for us that live in New York City, we share rooms with people a lot. And so even you might even have a teen that has a room, but they're sharing it with a sibling. So is that private? It's not as black and white as we think it may be. Because if you think about also like, well, your home is private, but the living room is really a public space in your private home. But then your doctor's office is a public space, but you can disrobe in a doctor's office. So is that a public or a private place? There's more nuance to this. And that's why it can be difficult for teens to just intuitively know these things sometimes. Yeah, so a big one here is masturbation. And masturbation is a very healthy sexual behavior. And I encourage parents and caregivers and providers to encourage healthy masturbation in privacy because it is a healthy sexual behavior. But we have to teach, right? So like this is something that people usually don't pick this up on their own. And if they do try and figure it out through something like trial and error, they're usually going to lead to problems. And so we have to teach what masturbation is. And we do this through stories, through verbal descriptions. We have to teach the method as well. And that again, through descriptions, we can demonstrate using other objects. We can't be with our teens when they're trying it out themselves. So it does take a lot of like explaining on the front end and hoping that the teen is able to kind of take that information in private and use it. We have to normalize masturbation. We have to teach them the myths about masturbation. There are a lot of myths that teens may tell each other about masturbation that is humorous to talk about, but it's important to dispel. And then how to appropriately do it, because if it's not done correctly, particularly for men, for boys, it can lead to problems, right? So if you're not doing it correctly, you can get skin lesions, you can get sexually frustrated and people get really like frustrated and irritable because of it. It might lead to compulsive masturbation because they're trying to get it right. And we don't want to punish these things. We want to like use them as learning opportunities to correct these behaviors. And the same thing with disrobing. Individuals with autism may disrobe if they get frustrated, and really making sure they understand this has to be in private. And if it's due to frustration or emotion dysregulation, trying to give them the best coping strategies they can to compensate when they're in public and get really frustrated, right? And when I'm working with teens, I do go black and white with discrimination between public and private, and I'll just do something like this, pull up pictures of the individual's house and just go through what we would call discrimination training. Is this public? Is this private? Is this public? Is this private? In your house, if you're interested in this, you can just put signs that say public or private, or make it like color-coded signs. One color means public, one color means private, to really reinforce what is public and what is a private behavior. The next area is boundaries. And boundaries are meant to keep people in our lives and to keep people out of our lives. And there are two types of boundaries. There's external boundaries, so like the physical spaces that we take up, and the internal boundaries. And these are more relational boundaries. And some teens with autism can be really rigid about their boundaries. So they keep a lot of people out of their lives. So they might have particular rules about the type of person they want to include in their life. They may have rules regarding the person needs to like a certain thing for them to be involved in their life, or they only, and these individuals, we're not as concerned about their safety per se, but what we are concerned about, are they going to be satisfied with their relationships if they're keeping so many people out of their lives? On the other end are individuals with looser boundaries. And these are individuals that let a lot of people into their lives, even strangers. These are the people that we worry about for their safety. And we obviously want to balance between rigid and loose. And again, this kind of goes back to the idea of there's a problem with our teens with discriminating what is safe versus unsafe. I'm going to go into this a little bit more later, but like we look at the kind of the scientific literature of how our teens with autism learn social rules. They learn social rules differently than many other teens. And sometimes we as caregivers, parents, providers have to take a step back and kind of just like reorient themselves and give them the gaps of the social learning lessons that they're not picking up themselves. So we want to balance between rigid and loose boundaries. And for the physical boundaries, it's very easy. Physical boundaries are easy and fun to teach. Personal space, and perhaps pre-COVID rules, but we actively would teach this in our sessions, our sex education sessions, right? So for those unfamiliar, the personal space rules, if you're standing with somebody, it's 1 arm's length. If you're sitting with somebody, it's 1 elbow's length away. And you can get fun with this in a session. You could put a hula hoop around somebody to show them, demonstrate what that space looks like. You can get like string and make your own boundary circle. So it's a very straightforward, easy way to teach experientially through experience and what physical boundaries look like. And then I like to show this clip from Seinfeld, the close talker clip, because it really shows the facial expressions are exaggerated of how uncomfortable the woman is with this individual being so close within their personal space bubble. The internal boundaries are a little more challenging to teach. And I like to use this term line crossing when I work with teens with autism. Going back, these are the behavioral boundaries. And these are the things that can get our teens into trouble. And in terms of their own behaviors, so when one of our teens may cross boundary lines, others may see it as threatening or offensive when it's not. And that's the thing that I'm most scared of when with our population, is somebody misinterpreting our teens' behaviors. And even though they're meaning to be harmless, they're meaning to be friendly, it's seen by the other person as threatening. I worked with a teen recently that had a crush on somebody and they really wanted to see them. And so they would wait in front of their house so when they come out, they can greet them right when they walk out the door. It's endearing and sweet in its nature, but that is going to get them into trouble one day, right? So we really have to teach them where the line is and what it means to cross the line in these situations. And it goes back to the idea of discriminating what is safe versus what may be unsafe. And a big factor here is social awareness, right? Just being aware of the social rules and norms, a perspective taking challenge as well. Again, just because you think a behavior is friendly and you are meaning to be friendly, it does not automatically mean the other person is going to see it that way either. So helping them kind of work through the perspective taking piece. How does your behavior going to impact the other person? And sometimes there are other variables that can impact line crossing behavior. Sometimes individuals on the spectrum, they're like lonely and they're frustrated, and that puts them at a higher risk to do something a little more risky and impulsively, socially or sexually, without like really thinking it through. And so we have to make sure like we can they have the ample opportunities to talk about ways they can increase their relationships, and they can meet people and people that they want to potentially date and get to know better romantically. And it's a concern because I've worked with individuals that there's a certain point where law enforcement has to get involved sometimes, and that again is something that I'm really concerned about for our population. Because they don't understand what's going on in these situations. They're trying to be friendly, and the next thing you know, they're in a lot of trouble. So unfortunately, I've worked with individuals that have gotten into trouble for things that they thought they were doing that were perfectly fine. And we really needed we had to protect our population and our teens here. But there are some things that are helpful for our teens with autism that would protect them from kind of line crossing. And sometimes, and the two major factors are, our teens with autism, for the most part, they don't like to deceive people, and they're not really good at deceiving people. So they're not doing it intentionally. And also, like, in my experience, for the most part, if we give our teens rules and we go through the rules, they are good at following those rules. If they understand them, what it is and why they have to do it, they are good. So they are a receptive audience. And we just have to give them the information so they can internalize it. And the final, this little picture on the bottom with the gentleman in the trench coat behind the corner is I put that there for a very specific type of line crossing behavior that can be problematic for our teens with autism. That's stalking. That's the the term we use in society, stalking. And this is a specific kind of line crosser that is somebody in society. This is how society defines a stalker. Is somebody that is a tab keeper, someone who may be intensely interested in somebody and is a follower of them. And in my experience, and there's some scientific literature on this, teens on the spectrum are more likely to exhibit stalker behaviors. They're not stalkers. Get that straight. They're not stalking. They're exhibiting behaviors that look like stalking. And we have to, again, provide the information of what crosses the line. What does that mean to cross the line? Even talking about what the term stalker and what it means is very helpful for our teens because they don't want to be that. Another, again, going back to, I guess, physical boundaries, I might put this in the wrong place, but physical boundaries, again, you can make it very black and white. what it's okay to touch on somebody, usually nothing, what it's not okay to touch on somebody, make it really black and white, true and false, help them discriminate what is safe versus unsafe. It can be a little more nuanced. So we might do something like a boundary circle. And a boundary circle is taking you in the middle, and each ring or rung of the circle is a different individual in your life. The further away from the center, the further you are relationally close you are to them. And, with your mom, dad, and your sibling, hug them and kiss them. With a teacher, high five, handshake. A stranger, maybe shake hands and maybe wave. So give them this kind of nuance of, with different people in your circle, what you can do with them. For the boundary, a book I like to use, a very simple method, is called A 5 Against the Law. And what this book does really, really nicely is that it makes it very simple. It gives a simple system for teens, their parents, their caregivers, and providers to provide a self-monitoring system of your behavior. So I know it's got stretched out in a PowerPoint. I apologize for that, but it's a 1 to 5 scale, and a 1 is just like friendly, harmless behavior. A 3 might be something that makes somebody uncomfortable, and a 5 is straight up like something that's against the law. And helping our teens rate their own behaviors. So like, oh, when you did this, was that a 1, 2, 3, or 5? And then helping them, what that does is that gives them a sort of like internal system where they can start, hopefully, to think about themselves on this 1 to 5 scale before they act. So if we make it a priority and we instill this in them, hopefully they will start to internalize it themselves and use it to regulate their own behaviors. 5 against the law. All right. Also in this area are the unwritten rules. And these are, again, for neurotypical individuals. We intuitively know these things. We pick them up through observation. We might hear about them, and we just kind of internalize them. These are rules that sometimes don't make any sense, but they're society rules. We might not even agree with these rules, but these are the rules that are expected, and they're unwritten. So they're not laws, they're unwritten social rules. And these are hard for our teens with autism to get without direct instruction sometimes. So, for example, the bathroom. There are a lot of rules about going to the bathroom. There's another psychologist named Peter Gerhardt. Maybe some of you have seen him speak before, but he goes through this thing called the urinal game in his presentations. Because there's a rule in our society of where men are supposed to stand in the bathroom in relation to the urinals. Okay, and again, we might not agree with that rule. It might come off a certain way, but it's a rule that men are expected to follow. Public transportation rules, where you can put your hands on your body while on public transportation, looking at people in public transportation, texting rules, how often you can text somebody before they can text you back. You don't want to over text somebody. Social media now is a big one. You can't send on Instagram, for example, you can't keep sending friend requests if they don't respond to your friend requests. You can't like every single picture somebody is posting. That comes across as a little unusual. And so these are things that we have to just directly teach. And my last slide is going to be a resource slide. So there will be books. There are 2 books that are out that kind of just go through these unwritten rules that are easy just to pick up and have them as a guide for you. And then victimization. And this is, again, a big safety concern. So as far as we know, teens and children with autism are as likely to be victimized by others, if not more likely to. And what I really want to focus on this slide is trauma in general makes it hard to communicate what happened to you. People don't always report their traumas that happened to them. Particularly if you have communication challenges, it makes it even harder. And so we have to really be mindful and careful and look for any behavioral indication that something's up, right? So On this slide right here, just increase aggression, self-injury, withdrawal, increase in their restricted and repetitive behaviors or interests, sleep problems, not eating as well, just a decrease of self-care abilities. All these are potential red flags that something may have happened. And please seek out a provider to guide you on what to do and how to assess and help your child in these moments. And just on this slide, there is people are trying to, pinpoint what exactly makes individuals with autism a risk of victimization. And it goes really back to this idea I keep talking about, is discriminating safe versus unsafe. How do you know what the red flags are? How do you know when somebody's trying to deceive you? Those are really big areas. And there's a problem with the way that we even are educating our teens when they're children sometimes. Like, we teach them compliance. There's an adult, you comply with your adult. We have a thing that we call compliance training. But sometimes over compliance, unquestioning compliance with people that may be helping you with your self-care and showering, using the bathroom, could lead to you being taken advantage of. So it is a challenge. While we need our children and our teens to work with their providers, we have to teach them how to keep themselves safe in these situations, as well. And finally, for older individuals, sometimes social isolation is a risk factor for victimization. Again, if they're feeling lonely, they may be more likely to, try to do something that can get themselves victimized. It's a really important area just to really be mindful of and keep.
Matt, there's a question here, and it's, can a child who used to love taking baths suddenly begin to avoid them?
No.
Does it always mean that it's due to victimization, or is it just a stage?
Oh.
Matt, are you there? I believe our presenter is having some technical difficulty. Bear with us 1 second. Matt, there you are. You're on mute. I don't know what happened.
Sorry about that. I don't know what happened either. You started talking and then everything went blank. I didn't hear any of the question. I apologize.
Okay, no worries. So the question was, can a child who used to love taking baths suddenly begin to avoid them? Does that always mean that it's due to victimization, or is it just a stage? By stage, they mean going from childhood to teenager.
That's a really good question. It does not necessarily mean that they've been victimized. No, so all the things I listed on that slide are red flags, but typically want to look for other patterns, right? So are you seeing more than one red flag, for instance? So I wouldn't necessarily jump to that conclusion. It could definitely be a stage where they are transitioning away from more childhood-friendly baths to a more teen adult-friendly shower. That's also possible as well. So great question. But other red flags, definitely look for. And if your child is able to verbalize these kind of things, maybe there's a way to ask them if anybody's ever done something inappropriate to them while they were taking a bath. Good question. Okay. Dating, I know we're jumping. Some of these transitions aren't that smooth, but talk about dating now. And this is something that's been a myth for a while, right? Individuals with autism don't want to date or not interested in dating. That's like complete, this is a myth. That, like, we're seeing, as I mentioned before, more and more television shows that are about autism and dating. So thankfully, as a society, we're understanding that individuals with spectrum have very high interest in dating as a whole. Obviously, each individual has their own view and their own values around dating, but as a population, yes, individuals with autism are interested in dating in teenage years and young adult years. Now, we actually have some research behind this, is that they have less information about how to date. And that goes back to what I mentioned earlier, how our teens with autism, they kind of learn about social things differently than neurotypical children and teens. And so they're relying on sources that other kids aren't relying on. So most teens and children rely on learning about dating through like their friends, their parents, maybe even through certain TV shows. Our kiddos are not learning that way. They're actually learning by looking things up on their own, mostly on the internet, and that can be a dangerous path. Has anybody ever been on the internet before? I can tell you. So we have to teach them all the gaps in dating that they need to know. Like, what is attraction? What does it mean to be attracted to somebody? What does it mean to flirt? Where do you even go on a date? What are the rules about, who pays for what on a date? We have to also kind of consider, like, again, safety here. Individuals can start to form rules about dating that are misguided. So, like, if I take somebody out on a date, I expect like a kiss at the end, for example. Like, that's a rigid rule that we have to challenge and kind of give them the correct information. And how to teach dating. Honestly, this is again something that I think I may have heard Dr. Gerhardt say at one point. The book How to Date for Dummies is a great guide, right? If you can find a way to take that book and make a message relevant for your individual, for your child, it's a great, goes through all the things that they need to know about. So high dating interest, we have to provide the right information. The final area here, and this is something, again, is a topic that is getting more and more information, is orientation, sexual orientation, gender identity, and autism. And I put the word multiple spectrum in quotes because that's not necessarily like a term that people use. I think I might have just like made it up on the spot, I think. But we have to deal, we're talking about individuals with autism and the gender spectrum and the sexuality spectrum. And what we are seeing, there's more and more evidence that individuals with autism are more likely to identify as either non-binary or as they're a non-given gender at birth. And people really try to simplify why this is. And I would just say there's no simple explanation for this, but the more important thing here is that we provide the right support around this. And so we have to be like screening this, like, how are you feeling about this? What's going on? Because there's a lot associated here. So it's confusing. And then if an individual is identifying and it is transitioning, there are other things they have to learn. They have to kind of relearn the world from another social perspective in some ways, not all the ways, but like hygiene, for example. We have certain hygiene rules. It goes back to what society expects of gender. It's not necessarily what is the best for each gender. And of course, there are issues with, bullying, isolation, mental health problems for trans teens. So we have to also be mindful of that. So it really is important here. Most important part of this slide is like, it's a relevant thing to keep on your radar. And it's something that we shouldn't look past because there's a lot of support needed in this area. And so like just wrapping it all up, individuals with autism absolutely deserve the right to learn about sexuality, make their own sexual decisions, form relationships, reflect and explore their attitudes in this area, develop healthy relationships, and of course, keep themselves safe. If I had my way, these are all the things that I would teach to an individual with autism in a sexuality curriculum, or I'm working with them one-on-one. As you can see, again, going back to the idea, it's more than just attraction and love and sex. There's a lot here. So on that note, I will open it up to questions. Thank you all so much for your time. And I also included here the books that I think are the best recommendations in this area. Some of them are directly meant for the autism population. Others are meant for the general population, but I find them to be really great and easily digestible for anybody. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Matt. Yes, we do have some questions. Yes, let's see. We have a question here. Culturally, I know it's a challenge to have a conversation or even know where to start for families who didn't have a conversation with their parents about sexuality as children. Would you recommend groups or individual conversations to start that conversation?
Groups or individual conversations? I guess I have a question back. What is meant by a group necessarily?
No further elaboration.
So I think the important variable to assess here to consider is perhaps comfortability of your own family and your child. And I guess obviously these things are really powerful individually, because you can really have a in-depth tailored conversation. With a group, you're going to get a broader message that may not be particularly relevant in some areas for your child. So individual is a really good start. The best part about a group though is that it normalizes a lot of these things. So like teens think that oh, I'm alone with this problem, or I'm the only person that's struggling with this. So that's where a group is really, really helpful, is that it helps normalize, give the teens a sense oh, actually other people have this issue as well. It's really interesting. The ideal world, both is great, but maybe individually might be a good start. And then if a group is still needed, totally go for the group as well.
Yes, and that parent was also sharing, a few parents in a group or maybe the entire family as a follow-up.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. And what that group might look like.
Yeah, that there's no good answer for that, to be honest with you. It really depends on your own family makeup and your family values. If it's culturally important for your family to have important conversations as a group, then you should be consistent with that. So if it's a culture that really values a group as a family unit, then you should continue to do that, because this is an important conversation as well, and it should be kind of with what your family thinks is needed.
Yes, and there's a story here that was shared. An issue that a parent recently had at home was, what does it mean to be horny, and how that can be misconstrued. It put the parent in a situation where they had to put on their own therapist hat on, because their perspective is that we need to be less politically correct, especially as parents from other cultures might get caught into this. For example, the father, who's 57, saw a text between the son and their best friend, and he jumped to the conclusion that they wanted to have sex, but the reality is that they wanted to kiss. And that was after she had indicated that she was horny after talking with the son. And then they realized that they just had the desire to be alone and kiss and express their attraction in a physical way.
Yeah.
The father hasn't had the ability to really assimilate with the American culture, so that was also an issue in that respect.
Understandable. A comment on this story. I think one of the things I didn't say in this presentation, I talk about, is slang terminology. So horny is a slang term, and teens with autism really don't quite get slang terminology that easily, or they have the wrong idea what slang terminology is. And so we can't, I work with my teens, I assume that they don't know what slang means, what slang terminology means. And so when they say something that's slang in it, or you might see something with slang in it, don't jump to conclusions. You should really take a step back and ask your teen, hey, do you know what this word means? Do you think you know what this word means? What do you mean by this word? And you might have more clarification with that.
Yes, and one of the things that we learn in professional development is to not fill in the blanks when we're asking those questions, not give them options, like, oh, it might be A, B, C, or D. Just let them express themselves, this is what it means to me, or this is what I heard it means, because then we've kind of primed them to give us an answer or a certain response. So
Great point.
good to keep that in mind. Thank you. There's a question. Do you have an online curriculum that you would recommend? There seem to be so many out there.
I don't. I do apologize. I don't have one I'd recommend, but I would encourage that person, if they want to follow up with some links, I can certainly review some of them for them and give some recommendations.
We do have a question here. How do you deal with an open-minded parent versus a very conservative parent under the same household? It's a great question.
That is a great question. That is a great question. Wow, guys, hard ones. Right. So I guess in this situation, right? So like, while sexuality education is values based, right? So like there are a lot of values instilled in sexuality education. At the end of the day, if I go back to this slide here, right? So teens with autism have the right to make their own autonomous decisions and develop their own attitudes, right? So it all we can do is give the information, and the information itself is really just like scientific, biological, and social information. And we hopefully can trust that our teens will make their own proper attitudes about this. So like all we can do is provide the information. And there are like this resource page has tons of mainstream links that, whether or not you may be more open-minded or conservative, is likely acceptable in both those cases. And just give the teen the information, let them make their own decisions about this.
Thank you. We do have a question here. How do I introduce the idea of the beauty of love when my child, who's 16 or 17, and how to respond when they comment that it is awful and disgusting and inappropriate to see any signs of affection, affectionate, happy posters, advertising posters, etc., and sex sounds so gross that people shouldn't procreate?
Yeah. So in this situation, that's a really good question. Again, this is a situation where values matter here. So like your team may feel like that now, and maybe they'll change their mind later. But also like to keep in mind that maybe this is how they feel in general. And while there might be language that they can use differently about how they talk about like physical connection, intimacy, and sex, maybe we can help kind of clean up their language and words they can use that are less like harsh or abrasive. We also leave the possibility that they may not be interested in sex as they get older, and that's okay. That is okay for them as well. Right? That's their own choice they're gonna make. But all we can do, we can't force it. All we can do is keep just keep having an open conversation about it and not trying to force ourselves onto our teens.
Thank you. Also, what does teaching safety from abuse? How do we do that? How do we teach safety from abuse?
Yeah, different kind of, yeah. So it really, I think the best way here is just to be very discreet and black and white about it and really teach those red flags. Like if you're talking about like physical abuse, for example, like, who can touch you, where can they touch you? And if anything is not in this list, then you have to tell your parent or your teacher. And then like, if you go think about relational abuse or emotional abuse, teaching what those red flags are when somebody's being manipulative to you, what are manipulative, or even if they're trying to groom you, like if an adult is like offering you to buy you things, you don't really know them well, like be very discreet and say like, this is okay, everything else is not okay, and you have to report that to a trusted adult immediately. Very black and white with that.
There's a question here. Do you have any resources that explain the harms of pornography?
So I'm looking at my list of books here. I think the first book, if I believe, might have a section about that. Sexuality and relationship education. So definitely look into that book and just verify. If you go like on Amazon, you can check the index of the book probably about pornography. Otherwise, I think there might be, I don't have any other ones off the top of my head. Again, another one that I can circle back to if it's sent to me after the presentation.
I believe we also have a resource on an online resource about pornography that I can share in the follow-up email. I'd have to find it. But yes, I see my colleague. Hold on one second. Wait, there's a question here. For young adults who use AAC, augmentative and alternative communication, are there phrases they must have on their system or any resources? Thank you.
Yeah, good question. I think with regard to sexuality, I think one of the most important ones to have on their system is something along the lines of like, I want to be alone right now, right? So giving them alone time if they want it, potentially to engage in a sexualized behavior.
There is something here. Thank you so much for this talk. It's been so helpful. My son I'm just reading here, has high functioning autism and just turned 10 years old. So not a teen yet, but soon. Recently, he has become fixated on sexual terminology and keeps repeating certain words out loud. For example, testicles, penetration, etc. I've talked to him about the definitions to make sure he understands what they mean, but it almost becomes a tic where he is constantly repeating these words. He says they get stuck. Excuse me, I lost my place. He says they get stuck in his head. Do you have any advice on how to handle this? I don't want to punish this, but I also want to limit these behaviors.
Love the question. You're right. You don't want to punish it. You don't want to punish any of these things. So what I would try to do first is, again, going back to public and private, and can we at least get him to only use this language at home, right? So obviously he's learned the words, they're not going away. He's going to keep saying them. So it's not a realistic goal that we're going to get him to stop altogether. And if he's essentially feeling also like this has become like a tic and an urge to him, even harder, that's going to wane over time. So I want you also to realize that that interest in these words, it likely will not last long term. It eventually will shift to something else. But can we try to get him to understand that this is something that has to be only said in private? Can you only say this at home? Go, say what you need to say at home. Really don't try to say this at school. If they really have a hard time saying it at school, honestly, like I would try to work with the school, but like, listen, like my son, my special needs son has these urges, they're becoming tic-like, he's a hard time controlling them. Like, can you go to the counselor's office midday through school and just like talk about sex for like 5 minutes? And is that enough for him? Right. So really try to keep it in private places only. And hopefully he has the ability now to inhibit those behaviors in public, but in private, he can do as he pleases.
Thank you so much, Matt. We are winding down. We do have a hard stop at 12:10. So if there are any questions, please ask them now. I do also want to bring some attention to my colleague, Carrie Banks at the Brooklyn Public Library, who's oversees inclusive services. And they're going to be hosting a workshop for individuals with developmental disabilities on sexual health. The information she has posted in the chat. It'll be Monday, March 21st from 5 to 6:30 p.m. And the registration link is in the chat as well. She also has a suggested resource available at the Brooklyn Public Library, which is the Autism Spectrum Guide to Sexuality and Relationships. Thank you so much for sharing that, Carrie. I know that's really helpful.
Yes, that is great, Carrie. That's awesome. I'm gonna look into that. While Carrie was saying that, also prompted me to remind myself that the Organization for Autism Research, OAR, also has really good materials for sex ed. So that's a website also to go to.
Yes, and we actually here at Synergia, we have posted a lot of their topics around the discussion of sexuality and sex ed for teenagers with autism.
Awesome.
Carrie was asking if you have any resources in Spanish.
I don't care. I'm not. I again would have to look into that. Not offhand. I'm so sorry. Obviously needed and important, but I don't know any off the top of my head.
Thank you. So yes, so we will, this is the second part of a 3-part series with NYU Langone and the Regional Center for Autism Spectrum Disorder. Our third installation will be, I believe, on March 22nd, and we will be discussing managing challenging behaviors at home and in the community. That'll be March 22nd from, I believe, 10:30 to 11:30, if I'm not mistaken. And you can find that on our calendar at synergiany.org/calendar. I'll also include that information in the follow-up email. But yes, I also would like to take a moment to highlight our participation in Project Shine. Project Shine, Synergia, and is a part of a network community of organizations. Synergia is included, but it's also Planned Parenthood of Greater New York, YI, AHRC, Self-Advocacy Association of New York State. You might have heard them as SANIS. Also the New Alternatives for Children. We've been working together to create equitable access to high quality information and affordable healthcare for individuals with developmental disabilities and intellectual disabilities to promote informed and supported sexual well-being across their lifespan. And we are partnering together to develop innovative tools for parents, caregivers, and teens to use to learn about sexual health and sexual well-being to help prompt those discussions. Also, Synergia has had hosted a number of workshops in the last year on how to have this conversation, more on sexuality in general, different aspects of sexuality, and I'll be including those in the follow-up email. They are available to view at any time on our Facebook and YouTube pages. We're happy to share that information as well. If you have any additional questions regarding this topic, we ask that you send them to the center, the Regional Center for Autism Spectrum Disorder. I will include that in, I'll put it in the chat, but I'll also include it in the follow-up email. And if you need anything from Synergia, you can always contact me directly, and I'll put my information as well here at the Metropolitan Parent Center. I also should say that we also have the Autism Initiative here at this Parent Center that supports teens with autism. We have an after-school art program that we do in collaboration with the Guggenheim Museum for ages, children with autism ages 3 to 13. And we also have our integrated transition program for teenagers with autism to give them a safe space to discuss topics that are important to them, including sex ed and sexuality. It has a facilitator and supervised by 2 behavioral specialists, and we're something we're very proud to offer that support. So we definitely have that. If you have any questions about those, please feel free to reach out to me, or you can always contact our intake line as well, which you can call directly or email them. Just putting my contact info here in the chat. But yes, are these programs under OPWDD or through another entity? So the Programs offered through the Parent Center are not do not require OPWDD eligibility, but they do require a diagnosis of autism. So yes, Synergy offers a number of other services that do require OPWDD eligibility, such as day habilitation, respite services for the night, weekend, or daily, housing advocacy. There are different qualifiers, but through the Parent Center, we do not require OPWDD eligibility. Thank you for that question. Are there any other questions for Matt before he has to leave us? I want to make sure we try and answer as many questions as we can. Just check Facebook really quick. Okay. All right. Well, Matt, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time and your insight. And yes, if anybody has any other questions, I'll be sure to forward them to the Regional Center for Autism Spectrum Disorder. I'm going to go ahead and activate a poll for everyone. But please feel free to complete the poll. Also, it should auto-populate on your screen whenever you click off of this presentation as well. The first time to hear about our organization, do you mean Milestone Psychology or Synergia? Milestone Psychology, Matt, do you have a website that you can type into the chat for everyone?
Yep.
Perfect. All right, I got it right here. All right, Matt, I'll follow up with you later. Thank you so much. And everyone, I'll go ahead and activate that poll now and stick around for any other questions that any of you may have. Thanks so much for joining us.
Everyone, thank you.
Bye, Matt.